After retirement, he formed Central UK in January 2011 and have today worked with 72 airport bus service, airside ops, and the management team for the UK and overseas in Singapore and many countries. This company is SFJ Awards, books training provider with a well-respected accredited course catalog and associates team. It has trained over 90 sites with 5 studio simulation software. It's survived for cancer in 2013 and have done 11 further surgery for benign tumors, other stable conditions as well. He speaks regularly, he runs and conference and provides advice support to other suffers today to that 120 sites up to over 2,500 firefighters, defense, and other responders. John was inducted in September to the world's 4th country of firefighting in London. Okay, thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you. Morning, everybody. I'll ping through this. I call this a machine gun presentation because we've 25 minutes to fit in what takes a lot longer normally. I'm not going to linger too long. He's already covered that. I joined the fire service in 1979, ops till 2011. I was always operational. But after that, I moved forward into training. The cancer work that I do is voluntary. It's nothing to do with my training company. I do this purely because it's a personal passion. So quick thanks. Obviously, so Alana and her team and Ulster University, Emily supported me at my conference in Manchester. I organised what today has been the largest conference of its type on cancer and contaminants 2 years ago in Manchester, and at Cranfield 3.5 years ago. So obviously Anna Steck at UCLan, because of the work she's done, a lot of the work that she's driven out to give us a lot of data. But very quickly, before I move on, I need to just stress to you all what they need from us, because the people who are doing the research, Anna, Emily, Svetlana and her team, they need us to complete the loop back to them of what have we actually done. They're doing the data, they're doing the scientific stuff that the bean counters need to see, but they need to know, what have you done? What changes have you made? So that when their deans are coming to them saying, prove we're giving you this time to do it, what actual difference is it making? So please feed back. If you want to feed it back through to me, I'll share it. So the Invisible Risk website, we own the domain of that. It's the name that my daughter come up with. And so you can send stuff to me. I can put it onto that website. Everybody can access that. And I'll make sure it's fed back to Emily, to Svetlana, to Anna Steck, whoever. Okay, so very quickly why I do it. Both me and my wife are cancer survivors. Between us, we had 11 tumours. 6 were malignant, 5 are benign. I've got another one growing at the minute. And the bottom end here, the cancer cells are still there, but behaving. But I put a trigger warning on. This is why I do it. This is what advanced cancer looks like. That's prostate cancer that has spread to multiple parts of the body. The black is cancer. So if we don't catch it at stage 1 and we let it spread, metastasize and become stage 4 remote, that's what it looks like. That was my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law died in December. It's why we do it. It's not just about people, finances and the way that we do a job. It's about saying if we find it early, we stop it, we cut the costs, but we save lives. We save the impacts on devastation that my sister, now 5 months on, is still devastated. So that's quickly what we've done. And at the bottom of that there, the talks that I've done, I've shared with people in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Argentina, Australia. I've done talks in Singapore, Seychelles, Gibraltar, all over. But has it worked? In some instances it has it worked enough? No, it hasn't. We need to do much more yet. Have we broken the silo work and mentality to it? That hasn't changed. NFCC, Fire Brigades Union, other agencies, they're doing great work, but mostly it's in silos and we need to change that. And as I said to Sheila before, I've been over here 4 times now. I don't see a difference. When I'm thinking about talks and conferences and everything else, I just think of the UK and Ireland as one, because we're all firefighters. All over the world are firefighters, so it doesn't change. So it's important to understand, and really, you know, already this morning we've gone through what the risk is, but are we telling people the why? Are we getting across to everybody the understanding of why? So I'll jump back to something Gavin talked about. When we say to people, we need you to wash your hands or wipe your hands because you're having a quick pee behind a wall on a barn fire, why are we telling them that? Do they understand why we're talking about statistics for penile cancer increasing in firefighters, dermal transfer, that it's thin skin connected to major blood vessels, where we've got the, if you will, the massive increase in testicular cancer, bladder cancer. Robbie Burns, who sometimes does these with me, he's had 32 transurethral operations for bladder cancer, and he's just been treated in January for prostate cancer. So it's about, when we're doing this, it's not to tick a box, it's to stress to people, we want you to understand the why we're asking you to do all of these things. Yes, decon on incidents. When I look back in the 80s, how busy I was, I don't really know how I would have done it, because we were wearing beer multiple times a night and turning out in double figures many nights. I don't know how we would have done it. That's the honest answer. However, what I want you to do is just look and say, do your staff understand the why of it? And as example, these posters here, all over fire stations, all over the country now that I work with, all the airports I work on. So these two were at Farnborough, where I was last week. And on the right-hand side, the prostate cancer one, and the, excuse the pun for the ladies, but the ball checker, I ask people, you've got the posters, but do you actually do what the posters are telling you to do? And the answer is no. So we've got the posters, but changing the culture to actually do what the posters are asking us to do, we need to change and get people thinking, yeah, I actually need to do that. The one on the other side were about prostate cancer, and then the SNOMED codes. We've got a massive issue with SNOMED codes. And SNOMED codes are a worldwide coding system. So I speak to a guy called Grant in Australia. He's just got that put on his medical records, and they're an international system. Some slight variances. Wales has a slightly different one, but what they're doing is helping GP surgeries identify early the exposure. Now, what I'm trying to do with the Parliament over in the UK is change that code so that it doesn't just apply to firefighters, it applies to all blue light responders. Because if I drag a fire victim out of a property, and a paramedic, and I know over here, and that's certainly Dublin, you know, Michelle, who was with us today, was a paramedic. That fire victim's off-gassing. That fire victim's giving particulates off. And yet the paramedics are not really protecting in terms of the kit and the exposures. And we need to make sure that if a police officer's passing a property, sees the fire, kicks the door in because he's trying to do civic duty, he understands there's a risk to that. We know there's a risk with fires, but they didn't know about the risks of, they've been in there, now they get back in their patrol car, driving round for the next 4 hours in a police uniform that's off-gassing inside the vehicle. So it's about widening out, because the IARC reclassification of firefighting to a class 1 cancer risk, it says firefighting. It doesn't say being a firefighter on its own. It's firefighting. So those agencies that work with us, they must surely also need to be aware and have some protection of it. And this one is a prime example. So this is at a Terberg. Alistair Cooper has been my big sponsor for the conferences. And it's a male breast cancer poster. It's the first one I've seen in literally, I've worked on 75 airports. It's the first one I've seen. But again, go around and ask people, do you understand about male breast cancer? What's it feel like if you were to check yourself? You know, people aren't doing what the posters are saying. So we need to look at the education and give them the reasons why. So I suppose you've got to ask yourself, have you got similar posters? How are you making sure that your staff are doing what the posters are there to inform on? Now, a whistle stop here. this was the photo on the left was 1980, and it's just to show the culture. Is that if you look at that picture, I have to move away from this. You've seen another yellow on it. Well, that's me. And I said, I can't breathe in here. And they went, don't be a sissy. That's what they said. That was the culture. Don't be a sissy. And I was brought up to be a smoke eater because that's what the generation, my older end, that's what it were. I actually went to the dentist from that because my station officer had said to him, I've got a dentist about, I've got a bad tooth. And the dentist, I went in stinking of that barn fire. And he said, no, you'll have to come back later in the week, you stink. So that was that. I was all time and they took me from the job. But that's only the one on this side. That's Liverpool John Lennon Airport. That's a substation fire. They've completely changed from when that photo was taken. And then on this one, now this is the same over here as it is over there. They're defence firefighters. But just look at the dual standard in that picture alone. So that's training. That's a training exercise on a military rig. And what you're ending up with there is complete dual standards. You've got a guy stood in BA, as we talked before, as Gavin said about respiratory, and the other guys, not at all. We're studying amongst foam that we now know far more about and heat exposures, everything else. The multi-agency exposure, again, some of the points already been mentioned. I spoke at the UK Fire Investigators Conference last July, and their faces were shocked because they're in there longer, as you mentioned, Gavin, they're in there for much longer, and that dermal exposure, what gets in through the hands, what gets in through the neck, they don't necessarily wear particular blocking protection for the neck. They weren't even wearing the right level of mask for the particulates, never mind the toxic gases. And the bigger one, which I'm going to come on to in a minute, nobody was using gas detection. Now, in the last 18 months, I've got a number of papers come from overseas. I speak to people from Finland, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, America, Canada, all over the place. And one of the things that come out was the impact of carbon monoxide. Low-level repeated exposures being identified as triggers for early onset dementia, Alzheimer's, muscular neuron disease, deafness and tinnitus, autotoxins. So looking at this, for me, everybody who works with us right through the chain of taking a fire victim into A&E and resus, cutting them clothes off, dealing with that casualty, there needs to be some kind of higher level education as to the contaminant chain. All through those there, I've been asked about military kill houses, going in, doing with flashbangs and everything else. What's the effect? Because they're explosives, they're pyrotechnics, and they're a mixture of quite nasty chemicals. And currently in England, there is a case, what would you call it? It's basically, there's helicopter pilots who were search and rescue for the Royal Navy, working on helicopter sinkings. They've basically got a class action underway against the MOD for exposures coming from the pilot sat above the exhaust port of the engine. So there's lots of things going on everywhere. What I'd like you to consider, it has a mental health issue as much as the physical issues. I never really struggled with the cancer part of it, but the mental health part of it, and I'm sharing openly as I do on all my talks. I'm stood here today with a pad on because I've got light coloured pants on, and if I cough, I'm likely to leak and stand here with a big wet patch. That makes me feel about this big, and the mental challenges that the treatments can cause to everybody, male and female. You know, Emily touched on about the menopause and the impacts that has. The mental side of it, when you have somebody in your service getting a cancer diagnosis, is massive, not just to them, but to the family, to the children. So what does your service provide? Does it have any provision at all looking at the mental health process? We talked earlier about retired. Retired in the main, I belong to a firefighter with cancer group. It's like a self-help group for newly diagnosed. There's 650 people in it. And they feel forgotten. They've retired from the job and they feel forgotten. And we need to look after all of that. Sheila mentioned in her talk there about the screening. In aviation, because it's a smaller demographic, we've moved things on much more. And so, again, you may have seen, certainly in the UK last week, about the announcement of the FBU working with the government on a concordat. The airports, of the ones I've worked with, we've now got 18 that screen at the age of 40 for prostate cancer, and a number of them have moved it across not just firefighters, but people who work airside. Go and catch the plane home tomorrow, and that smell that you smell in airside is not a good smell when you know what's in it. So the environment for aviation firefighters is a double-edged sword, if you will. They're not getting the house fires at the frequency that local authorities are, but they're working daily in an environment that is full of those same particulates and volatile organic compounds we're talking about. I'll come back to the invisible risk awards. So I don't know whether Ireland has the same codes. It's worth checking, but it is a worldwide process. They have different labels. But you can see now, if you look at the second one, occupational exposure to toxic agents, does that not really apply to police officers and paramedics? Because for me, it does. You know, the toxic agents that they're dealing with coming off a fire casualty. But it's about making the people who provide the health aware of those codes so that they can help people. And whistle stopping a bit, aren't I? Do you have a screening program, and what does it look like? And what do we need to screen for? So go back to Emily's talk about female, you know, at what age, because there's a big debate going on, at what age do we start screening for breast cancer? We know what the age is for the general populace. Prostate cancer, mine was prostate cancer. I was diagnosed with an enlarged one in 2011. And in 2013, they'd forgot to do the checks. And when I went back, my PSA jumped quite high, and they said it's likely you've got prostate cancer. So I jumped through all the tests, had it cut out, had quite a lot of complications. But screening does make a difference. For people like Sheila, who's in charge of the budget, if we catch it at stage 1, from a personnel standpoint, 92% of people diagnosed at stage 1 will return to work. At stage 4, that drops to 22%. So then potentially Sheila's faced with having to recruit and retrain and cover that absence for that person not coming back to work. So it makes a massive difference. However, linked to that is proper exposure logging. We need to have really good exposure logging that's got detail in it. The Svetlana, Emily, Anna work on data, and we just don't have that. It's no good saying I went to a fire and I was exposed to smoke. We need to know how long differences. Why couldn't you not get clean with something that stopped you getting clean? There needs to be a personal responsibility to filling that in accurately and making sure that it's a genuine record, because some people will cook on that. It's got to be countersigned. So we're doing a lot of work on that. And that data will drive changes to the way we screen and everything else. But this is the one takeaway, this next slide, that I'd like you to consider taking away, because it's the one change we can make relatively easily, and that is proper gas detection use. I've seen fire services now with gas detection on the frontline trucks, and most of the people have no real idea what they're doing with it because it's seen as an hazmat tool, and it's not. I was an hazmat officer. I used to use them. Did I understand them like I do now? Definitely didn't. But it gives you better command overall. In the document that Sheila shared, the Irish guidance, it talks about in clean air. Nowhere, and I'm not being critical here, did it mention gas detection. It says in clean air. Define clean air. How do you know you stood in clean air if you're not monitoring where you stood? So that's one element of it. For the airports, it's really good for better dynamic cordon management, because if we shut a stand over on the airport now, the airport directors will be on the case of the officers really quickly, wanting to know why. But if you've got evidence on a gas detector showing you've got unsafe levels, there is no argument. It stays shut till that gas detector shows it's much safer. If you put in a fire investigation team into a burnt out property, we should be checking, because low level exposures of carbon monoxide and low level is below the triggers that's laid down in tables is actually being attributed to significant issues. One of them being deafness and tinnitus in firefighters. I've got it in both ears. My ears ring better than Quasimodo's bells. You know, they're like, but that's many fires. You know, I'm in the, you know, we were very busy. So this information's come out in last sort of probably 18 months, but, you know, do people in the room know what the short-term exposure level is for carbon monoxide? You know, so we give them a gas detector and we put them into a property, but it means nothing if they don't know what that is. So we're clearing a kitchen out. This next picture was a fatal fire that I was in charge of, and we spent probably 4 hours in that. There's a body just on the floor over here. We spent 4 hours in that. But back then, we would never, ever have considered going round it with gas detection and making sure that the levels we were in without RPE, so I'm not talking about BA now, we've dropped, when we turned up to this, the explosion had blown most of the fire out. There was hardly any smoke in it. But because it was like that, our guard went completely down. And I'll hold my hand up. I was terrible at following my BA team into buildings. If my BA team were in the bedroom, I were probably on the landing of the house, just under the smoke layer, because I were an idiot and I paid the price of it. So hopefully what this room and all the other conferences and the people listening in do is create the legacy for the generations on from here. Because we're not changing it right now. We're making a difference now, but the change is down the track. That's the bit. I launched last year the Invisible Risk Awards at Biggin Hill seminar with 3 winners and a special award. I'm going to do it again at the next conference. I've got some really good nominations coming in. I'm going to open the nominations up again, and it is open to Ireland as well. It's not just UK, because the reason for doing it is to share the best that people are doing. So I look at the nominations. I've got a number of people on the committee to look at it with me, so it's not just my opinion. And the idea is we look at it. How am I doing for time? How long have I got? Okay, right. So I'm going to whistle stop just through some things that have changed, just to give you some thoughts. So this is an ionisation towel that is in the BA room at Biggin Hill Airport. It ionises the air in the room. It does make it smell cleaner. I'm not convinced that it's the full solution. I think it could be engineered better. There are other options. However, when you do go in the room, when you link that up to what they've put around the station, Biggin Hill, they'll quite happily share with any of you. If you want to contact them, email me and I'll put you in touch with them, and they'll show you what they've done, because they're the one station where the whole station and the airport has bought into this 100%. Everybody on station is properly on board with why we're managing contaminants in the right way. So the tile is one thing, the washers is the other, nitrile gloves all around the station. They don't touch a piece of equipment on daily checks without wearing nitrile gloves. They have proper zoning systems. They're really good. This is a fire panel, an attack panel. So this is something Sheila mentioned. This is again was at Biggin Hill. It's one of the seminars we're at, and this is basically just using the attack panel. Hang on, oh, it's not playing. It's basically when you put that on with the smoke, it crackles, you know, and it's really effective. But the smoke's glycol based, so it's completely safe. I've been in that with gas detector. One of the things that I'm talking to Emily about last night is what we need to do on not just on standards, but is getting the testing done, blood and urine testing, and saying, if you're telling me this undergarment is particulate blocking, show me the proof. Show me that it's been tested and that a person wearing it has got lower levels of, if you will, toxins in the blood. They're not cheap, these, and I wish that there were manufacturers, more of them, that could create a market, because when you've not got a lot, the price stays high. A couple of other bits and I'm done. Obviously, on the airports, airside, and this is not just airports now, we say, well, if people are out there putting your baggage on the plane tomorrow, they're breathing in particulates, they're breathing in fumes, etc. So those same procedures that we're teaching firefighters, that we should be teaching paramedics and police officers, apply to them. You know, so that's what's happening. They're now being a project. There's a number of sites really took this on. Manchester have issued kits to every airside roving officer, and then the airside teams like Swissport are now getting their teams on board, getting clean, focusing on the key areas. Why we're talking about the net. When Gavin said about putting it down here, how many of your staff know why we're saying this point of exposure is significant? You know? When we talk about showers, Sheila mentioned about female showers. I know that there are females who have no shower facilities, and those that have are going putting the same underwear back on because they never brought any to the station as a spare. So what's the point of having a shower to then put the same underwear on that you had on the incident? It's education. Everything's education. Last couple of slides, really. These are air cards. Alistair was telling me these. We used these initially at Biggin Hill. They react, one of them's sealed, one's open, and they react to volatile organic compounds. And we put these in the trucks initially to see just how quick they changed. It was interesting at Biggin and at Leonardo Helicopters because you're seeing rapid change when the bay doors were open and an aircraft taxied past. And I'm translating. I was local authority. I knew nothing about aviation until I started working in it in 2011, but I know it really well now. But the point is, it's the same processes up and down. That's a simple thing, really quite low tech. But when you send that in, if you scan the QR code on it and send it in, you get a report back that tells you what actually has affected those pellets. That's data that really we need to share. And that bit's missing, that bit. Most of the people who use them haven't done that bit. This is air monitoring around the station at Biggin Hill. So this is in front of the bays, at the back of the bays, in the areas where people work, where they eat, and it gives you information in real time that you can do. For those who are senior officers in fire, if you contact Ian Ray in Surrey, he's been working with a company called Imbiot. They've done a lot of work on station in terms of what's actually happening, and they've looked at quiet retain stations to busy old time stations. So he's got quite a lot of information he'll be willing to share freely with you. Nitrile gloves, that's the Sentinel that sits in the cab. It's the same process as the tile in the seal. It's an ionization device so that if somebody does get back on in the cab and there's a smell in the cab, it kind of cleans the air. The alternative is Station Protect and Crew Protect. These are a filtration system. It's just a different product. I don't sell products. I'm not on commission for anything. This is just what's going on and being used in different areas. So this has just gone in at Imperial War Museum at Duxford. That station's being built from the ground up as contaminant safe. That's one part of it in the high population areas. Clean cab appliances, West Yorkshire Fire Service, they changed their fleet. I've been round. Them are Surreys. And then on the next slide here, this is basically lockers that they've built into trucks. So the little one is for when you've had nitrile gloves on, you put them in there as that's like the disposal of them. And the back one is the driver's kit behind the rear wheel. And then the fire kit has a locker above the pump bay for dirty fire kit if they're going back to station. Slide outs, all measured to people. Their fire investigation unit has these, they're called basically shoulder sinks. And so they have them in the back of their FI units. It's filled with water. It's filled with like an hand moisturizer and water, so that if their FI people have been in and the gloves have been compromised, they can at least wash their hands and then put some barrier cream on as part of that process. So they put that on all their FI vehicles. I think going forward, they're going to look to put it on other vehicles. Perhaps an important one. I know I'm getting close to time, so I don't want to run over. The Air Accident Investigation Branch are obviously not a fire service, but they attend every air crash, etc. And we work quite closely with them on courses that we run. And what they've done, and just a really interesting point here, they, Carly, we work with, got a benzene monitor, and they had a single engined aircraft that was off gassing for 72 hours in the hangar after they'd recovered it. There was a significant aircraft incident involving 4 fatalities a few months ago at Southend. that aircraft was off gassing for over 20 days. So what we're trying to illustrate with the data we're getting is that something, again, it isn't just at the fire. It might be days, it might be hours, or a long time afterwards that we're actually still being exposed. And so the AIB have done a massive amount of work. They're just some of the things. You can have this copy if you want, but that's just what they've done. They've worked with the school, the Naval Medicine School. They've changed what they do. They've changed everything about what they do on the back of what we're all doing. So that's what the awards are going to be. You can see on there, Martin Green was a campaigner like me. He died just before the Manchester conference, but he's a real champion. Was Martin. So there's an award for a very special person. So Robbie Burns won it last time, but I'm trying to encourage changes at training centres. Innovation is somebody doing something that actually really does innovate, keeping responders and firefighters safer. The Worshipful Company of Firefighters, they're looking to build a bigger network. So the new master, this man here, that's Peter Holland. He was my chief fire officer in Lancashire, probably the best chief I ever worked for. He was brilliant. He, from July, will be the upper master. And he said for his 12 months, he wants contaminants to be his topic. So he wants to work with us on that. I want to say to you, you can send anything to me and I can put it on the Invisible Risk website. I share resources to that. We own that domain for 10 years. So we can put anything on that website. And please don't think that that piece of water separates us, because it doesn't. Everybody is the same. We're in a job. And people like Emily, like Svetlana and her team, and Estek, the scientist side of it, they're in our team too. Close the loop out. If you're doing something good, send it to me and I can send it on. And thank you very much.